Hey there, Facebook. Taylor Hemness here from 41 Action News for another episode of Faith in KC. First, an apology. This episode was supposed to be out a couple of weeks ago, mid-November, and the day it was supposed to come out, my wife tested positive for COVID-19, and so I had to go into quarantine for a couple of weeks, and it was right around Thanksgiving time. It was quite a time. I don't know if you saw it on my Facebook page, but I talked about it there a little bit. And my wife was in isolation. She's doing much better now, but she was in isolation for 10 days. And my 3 sons and I had to tough it out through a week of virtual school. And then she finally got to come out on Thanksgiving Day. So I'm sorry for the delayed new video. Also excited about a new format for Faith in KC. You may realize that typically these come out on Monday morning, but we're changing some things up. We're going to start doing kind of a preview of what the episode's going to be about during the middle of the week, and then this will come out on Sunday mornings, the new episodes, and we're also going to put just the audio on our podcast platform from 41 Action News, 41 Files. So if you just want to listen to it, we know these are lengthy videos. If you don't want to sit and watch the entire thing and just want to listen to it maybe in your car, you've got a little driving to do, we're going to make that possible too. So we just want you to be able to listen to these however is convenient for you. Out here on the basketball court behind my house, it's my neighbors, but we share it. Or I say we share it, they allow me to use it, my sons to use it, because of what we're talking about today. You may be familiar with Mindy Corporon. She and her family were victims of a hate crime a few years back in Kansas City. Her father and her son were shot and killed by a person who was trying to target Jewish people. They're not Jewish people, but he didn't know that. They were at the Jewish Community Center. My kids play basketball on this court, and they're learning to play basketball now in their leagues. I just took my oldest to practice last night, and I can't fathom dropping him off someplace that I considered him to be safe and then losing him. Any parent can't fathom that. That's the nightmare scenario, worst thing any parent can think of. But Mindy lived through that. So I wanted to talk to her about loss and grief and anger and her faith. When we put the preview episode up for this a few days ago, we had a comment from a viewer talking about, I'm not sure if this is what a local news station should be doing, and that's exactly the kind of conversations we want to have. This is, in case you haven't seen some of the other episodes, this isn't supposed to be me preaching, or any guest preaching, or me pushing faith on you or anyone else. It's about how people are using faith to rebound from things this year being this year, COVID and everything that goes along with it. Racial upheaval, political upheaval, how people are turning to faith this year, and how people have used and turned to faith in the past to respond to things. So as always, I hope you'll enjoy this episode. I hope you'll share your comments, please. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. Reach out to me there and share your comments. Let me know what you think. Let me know who else should be on. Let me know what we should talk about in the faith realm. And I welcome those comments as often as you want to bring them. But for now, enjoy this new episode, and thanks again to Mindy Corporon for taking part. Well, hello, Facebook. Welcome to another edition of Faith in KC. Taylor Hemness here from 41 Action News today. Glad to welcome you here, and really glad to welcome today's guest, and that's Mindy Corporon, who is joining us from a few states away via Zoom. Mindy, good morning. Thanks for hanging out with us this morning.
Good morning, Taylor. Thank you. You didn't have to tell me when I wasn't in Kansas, because nobody would know because of all the Zoom meetings.
It does throw off location a little bit for people now. We no longer have any idea where anyone is, I think.
Right.
We are taking a little bit different tone with this episode than we've ever done in previous episodes. And that is specifically because of Mindy's background and her expertise and the events of the last 6 years of her life. and that's in large part talking about grief. So, Mindy, if you would, for the people that are watching this that are not familiar with you or with your story, if you could let people know about what happened to you and your family 6 years ago.
Right. Okay, Taylor, thank you. Thanks for doing this for Kansas City and for everyone that starts watching. I was glad to see some of the links that you sent me and to get caught up on what you're doing. Our family. So in April of 2014, a white supremacist came into Kansas from Missouri. He was from the Aurora, Missouri area, and he murdered my dad and my oldest son, Reet, who was 14 at the time, and then he murdered Terry Lamano. He murdered my dad and son at the Jewish Community Center in Overland Park, Kansas, and then he drove to Village Shalom, where he murdered Terry Lamano. In that time frame, he shot at numerous people, and I want to say 15 comes to mind. I know that there's record of how many people he shot at. So that is what happened. That is what led me to, unfortunately, have an experience that you want to talk to me about today.
Why were the people that he targeted? What more do we know about why he picked them now?
He wanted to murder Jews. He was a white supremacist. My dad and son are Christian. I'm a Christian. Terry Lamano is Christian, of the Catholic branch, but she's Christian. And he wanted to murder Jews. And so he planned his day to go to 2 Jewish locations and murder as many Jews as he could. And when he saw my dad's truck pull into the parking lot, he thought that he could murder 2 Jews at once. And this is information that I gathered from court documents, things that he said. So, people, I actually told someone this weekend who didn't know us and asked a question about our older son and why he was in heaven. And I explained that to him, and he said, I hear about that on occasion. He said, I've never met anyone that actually happened to. He said, so it's real. He said, there really are white supremacists that go to that length. And I said, yes, there are people who hate so much that they will go to that length. And it's documented. Heather Heyer was murdered by someone who drove a car into a whole group of people in Charlottesville. And, the church in Charlotte, where the shooter went in and sat with praying people, the praying Black parishioners, and sat with them at the Mother Emanuel Church and prayed with them and then murdered them. So, white supremacy, unfortunately, is very broad. There are different factions that believe different things. I can't at all pretend to tell you what they are, but this person in particular wanted to murder Jews. He had always thought that Jews were taking over the world, that Jews were taking over the financial system. They were ruining him. He had been was very well known by the Southern Poverty Law Center. He was very well known by the Anti-Defamation League, and had been for years. He had been in the Witness Protection Program of the United States government because he had turned on other supporters of white supremacy. So he had been in prison. He wasn't supposed to be able to buy firearms. There were so many things about this man that should have kept him from harming anyone. And he exploded that day with plenty of firearms, murdering my dad and son in cold blood in a parking lot in the middle of Overland Park, Kansas on a Sunday. And it was Palm Sunday. So as a Christian, it was our Palm Sunday. So that's why he did it. And so there are people, I didn't know at the time that those kind of people existed either. I didn't know that kind of evil existed. I knew that people had disagreements and that people argued and we all had opinions and we had the opportunity to vote, et cetera, like we're doing now. And we're about to know in the next, week what happens with the current vote. But I understand much more in my heart and my world that there is evil. And you really do, as concerned citizen need to at least be paying attention to that when people are able to continue their thought process and they are not thwarted in some way, like with a discussion or with, he shouldn't have had guns, so he should have been in jail at the time because he was hoarding guns. If people aren't stopped in some manner, whether it's, just with a conversation or with a court order or something, they can ruin and completely change the trajectory of your life.
The phrase, and honestly, to hear you talk about that just recently having someone say, I didn't realize people like that were there, and here we are 6+ years after when it happened to your family, is interesting. That there's still people that, I don't want to say have blinders on necessarily, but just don't see some of the things that are out there. I'm curious. The phrase, as you were talking there, the phrase, everyone's got a plan until they get hit in the mouth, came up to me. And it's a little bit crass, but that's what I thought about and in terms of faith. I think faith is something that, whether you come into faith as a child, like I did, and kind of raised in the church and grow up with it, or something you're new to, you have kind of if smooth sailing is occurring, faith. And then if something awful happens to you, that faith has a potential to be dramatically shaken. How did the attack on your family affect your faith then and even now today? Do you even know the answer to that question yet? Is it still affecting you now? How did that affect your faith?
It's been a journey. So I will tell you, I don't remember a time when I was not a Christian. So I was also born
Sure.
into the faith of Christianity. My dad's father was a pastor, and then my dad was not a pastor, but he was a medical provider. He was a physician, and on occasion he would take the pulpit. So I remember as a young girl that if the pastor wasn't in on a Sunday, that my dad would be up on the pulpit talking and preaching. And he was a prolific reader, very voracious reader, and so and then on my mom's side, we couldn't go to Ponca City, Oklahoma, and not go to the Methodist Church. Like, it just was part of what we did. And so Christianity has always been part of my life. But the word faith didn't take a strong hold until the day they died. Until literally the day they died. So Taylor, I don't know if you know this, but this is what happened to me on that day when they were murdered. I wasn't there. I didn't drive Reet to his audition. My dad drove him to the audition, and I went to about Shawnee Mission Parkway to one of the Shawnee Mission high schools for a lacrosse game. I was going to a lacrosse game for Lucas, who was 12 at the time. And the lacrosse game was canceled. And so I got in my car fairly quickly and turned around and went back to the J. And I got to the J at 108. I was pulling in the drive at 108. And why do I know that? Because I looked at my clock and thought to myself, I'm probably here before them, because Reed's appointment was at 1:30. So I pulled in and I found them dead. I found my dad, dead in the parking lot. And I found Reed injured, and he lost his life about an hour later. I found my dad dead in the parking lot. And when I ran to him after stopping my car, I ran to him. And as I got close to him, I felt like these hands stopped me and just pushed back. It was just like this pushback. And there were no humans there. I saw no one for a while. And I felt this pushback, and I wanted to go to his body. I wanted to touch him and hold him and help him. I could physically see, I could see that there was no way he was living by the way he had been injured. I could visibly see that. But I still wanted to go to him, but I was pushed back. And I paused, and I heard the words, "Your Father's in heaven, go find Reed." They were really loud, powerful words. It wasn't like booming words from the cloud. It was just this sound. These words were so clear. "Your Father's in heaven, go find Reed." And the path I should have taken should have been around the left of him, because there were no cars to the left of him. But to the right of him was his truck. Again, I couldn't see anyone, and to my knowledge, I wasn't hearing anyone. But I walked around to the right, and there was Reed. And he was in the arms of two men who were trying to save his life. Okay, so that happened to me. And that has really made me question and think about my faith. And I don't mean question whether I have faith, but question what is it and who is God? I talk to God much more now like a best friend than I used to talk to God. I never used to talk to God like a best friend. I get angry at God like I get angry at my husband.
Yeah.
I get angry at God like I would get angry at someone who is hurting someone else. I know that God can handle my anger. You know, it's scary about that day was when a week or two after their deaths, I found things that led up to their death. And I remember things that if I had thought about them in a different way, I might have been concerned that something was going to happen. So about 2 weeks before Reed's death, we were having a pretty deep conversation. He was very intelligent. And we were just walking out of church, and it was something that Adam Hamilton had said in church, and Reed was questioning it. And he said, I don't know if God is all knowing. How can God be all knowing and all loving? How can he know everything and still love at the same time? Because there's so many bad things in the world. And Adam, as most preachers do, he was receiving guests and etc. And I said, would you like to stop and talk to him right now? He goes, no, I can do it later. Well, he never got to do that. And then in the car, a week or so before he passed, he said, Mom, I'm not ready to die. And I said, I know you're not ready to die. And it was just like out of the blue. And he wasn't a child that was mentally ill or having difficulty with suicide thoughts. It was just something else. And then 2 years before that, Taylor, 2 years, I was just drawn to church. Like I could not get enough spirituality. I could not get enough Christian songs. I could not blanket myself enough with Christianity. I had to be in church almost every time the doors were open. And I'd never been that way. And I remember stopping the car one day and crying and thinking, God, am I going to get cancer? Like, are you preparing me for cancer? Or what's going to happen to me? And I thought, of course, something's going to happen to me. And it's scary to think about things when we're touched. It's frightening when our heart is touched. It's scary to be pierced in the heart and not understand what you're being asked to do. And but I remember saying to God and to our church when they asked us, when God asks you, will you follow? And people are like, yes, I'll follow. Yes, I'll follow. Well, when Dad and Reed were murdered, was I still going to follow? Was kind of how I felt like one of the questions was. And even though it made me angry, I have still followed because I did know that they were in heaven. So for me, when people ask about my faith, I know they're in heaven and I get messages all the time. I know that heaven exists and there's just no doubt in my mind. And I know people who maybe have not lost someone, or maybe they've lost someone and they don't get the kind of messages they get, or they don't understand them or connect them like I do. I know that there is heaven, and it's a beautiful place, and that they are happy, and that they help make things happen for us, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes what we want doesn't happen. I wanted Reet to survive. I found my dad dead, but Reet wasn't dead yet. Yeah. I prayed for him to survive, and he didn't. And was I angry? Do I get angry at God? Absolutely. I get angry at God, but I know that there's a purpose in my life. And sometimes, some days I'm like, am I still in my right lane? Am I still doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Taylor, I left my career. I left my wealth management career, and I opened a foundation, and we put on an event, 7 days, Make a Ripple, Change the World. I'm wearing our Go shirt today.
Right. Yep.
So I do that, and I do public speaking. And I'm opening a for-profit company called Workplace Healing. I mean, my whole trajectory has changed. Again, like you mentioned, I'm in Florida. We moved to Florida. We moved our son to Florida because he needed to heal. And every new thing I do, every single thing I do that's new is done because of their deaths, is done because someone murdered them and God picked me up and said, I have you. Go this way.
Yeah.
Go in this direction. And so I listen with my head, I listen with my heart, and I follow what I feel like is the right thing that God's leading me to do.
I'm not here to compare life events because I would hope the majority of people who watch this or listen to this or hear you speak can't even begin to say I've had anything like what's happened to Mindy ever happened.
I hope not either. I hope not either, because people who lose their child in any way, by suicide, by accident, by cancer, by illness, by murder, it's horrific. It is a pain you don't know you have the ability to feel. And any parent who loses a child knows that there is a pain inside of us that you hope to God that you don't ever feel during your lifetime.
Yeah. The idea of faith challenging events versus faith strengthening events first kind of came to me when my wife and I were trying to have kids. We very much wanted to have kids and had some medical issues where the chances of that sometimes didn't look great. And we spent about 4 years trying to get pregnant with our first. And thankfully now we have 3 wonderful, healthy little boys. But we spent about 4 years. And I tell people it was a faith strengthener for me because I was not ready to have a kid when we first started trying to have a kid. And it was a faith challenger for my wife because she really went through some dark days, angry with God, as you were mentioning there, with her faith. You encounter so many people now as you go through your public speaking and through the 7 days events, that kind of thing, that go through those kinds of events, challengers and strengtheners on a regular basis. What kind of things do you hear from people about major moments of conflict, of despair, of tragedy that people are experiencing when they come and talk to you about those fork in the road moments of faith? What do people talk to you about whenever they come in and talk to you about those things?
Yeah, it's a choice. It's a choice. It is literally a choice every single day to say, I'm going to choose the good path. I'm going to choose good in people's life. I'm going to choose good in my life. I'm going to choose that I believe. It's the same thing as choosing kindness over being a crappy person. You can choose. You can choose. When I drive a car and somebody races past me or cuts me off, my husband and son will get mad and they're like, oh, they did this or they did that. They might even say an expletive. And I'll say, you know what? They might be racing to the hospital because their child just got admitted.
Sure.
I just go that direction. I'm like, I'm going to choose to say they're doing that because of whatever. As humans, we all think that other people are thinking about us. We're not thinking about other people. We're thinking about ourselves. We're thinking about ourselves. Like, okay, does my lipstick look okay? Does my hair look okay? How's, just in general, people come up to me when I speak or we do a program, or like we did our Love Day event and we had an interfaith panel. So Faith Always Wins is an interfaith organization. And that means atheists, agnostics, pagan, Buddhist, Christianity, because what's important, Taylor, is that we understand one another and respect one another. Now, does that mean we agree? No. But can we not agree and still have a civil conversation? Most people can. Most people can do that. It's not always what we see on TV right now, but most people can have a conversation about something and say, I didn't know that, or tell me more. Tell me how that makes you feel. But it is a choice. It is a choice to feel confident in how you feel and or your decision-making process. and be okay with, maybe I made a mistake. Maybe I am wrong. I'm okay with being wrong. I've always been like, you know what? I was wrong about that. But my faith is so deep inside me. I know I'm not wrong about that, but I might not understand why a pagan thinks a certain way, or why a Jewish person celebrates something that I don't celebrate. I don't know. And just to think about other people in a way without knowing them, without knowing who they are as a human, is what we tend to do. And social media has not helped that. You know, you just have this this high level picture of what somebody is, or how they might represent themselves. And if you haven't sat down and had a conversation with them, you don't know where they're coming from. You don't know their life experiences.
Yeah.
Frequently, people will say to me, I don't know your pain, and you're an inspiration. And I will say to them, I'm only here to inspire you if you're willing to choose that. If you're willing to choose that life can go on. See, I had to choose that. I had to choose that life can go on. And, or they will say, I know what you feel, and I'm part of the club. And I meet a lot of people who say, I'm part of the club. And I appreciate knowing that you share your experience, because I felt those, but I didn't know how to express those feelings. Yeah. So I tend to appreciate both sides of that. I would say I really value the parents who come up to me and say, I couldn't express my feelings the way you did. Thank you. Because sometimes we feel a little crazy. You know, I mean, when I told Adam Hamilton, I think I heard God talk to me, I was frightened to tell someone that. I mean, when I say that publicly, when I told you, it's recorded now, you know, it's on all kinds of recordings. Mindy heard somebody say, your Father's in heaven, go find Reed. And I believe it was God. And so some people might look at me and say, you're crazy. And I'll be like, you know what? You weren't there. That's what I know to be true. But we have to know and have confidence that we're not always going to make the right decision, but God will still be with us. We're not always going to be loved by somebody else, but God will always love us. We're not always going to have a great, happy road, but we can make it happier if we choose to make it happier. So it was interesting in April of 2020 when COVID was like really hitting all of us and people were coming to the realization, you know, we were all on lockdown still in April, and 7 days had to pivot from in-person to virtual.
Yeah.
And that's also when the shooting happened, April 13th. And so as April 13th approached, everyone was sad. Everyone was sad and everyone was depressed and everyone was grieving, but they weren't grieving because of the same reason I was grieving, but I could feel it. I could feel this palatable grieving. And I even did a post about it. And I said, I can feel you all grieving, even though you're not grieving the same reason I am. I like having you alongside me. I like not grieving by myself. I don't wish for everyone to grieve as often as I do, but it was helpful to have other people feel the heaviness of your life drastically changing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like everyone all of a sudden had a little glimpse of, this is what it's like when someone is ripped out of your life.
Yeah.
I talked a whole lot, and I hope I answered your question.
No, you did. I was going to ask you, because one of the reasons we're doing this series is, and we started the series, is because we felt like faith doesn't get talked about a whole lot necessarily on a local news level, we'll say. And even with that being the case, it is a major integral part of so many people's lives, for good or for bad, honestly. A lot of people who have chosen to walk away from faith, or who have had bad experiences with a faith community, potentially. It's a big part of people's lives, and we don't talk about it a whole lot. I know you're no longer in Kansas City, but that was not an all the time case after what happened, and you were here for a little while, and you still have connections here, obviously, and are part of the 7 days event. What have you learned about the faith community of Kansas City since you have begun this new way of looking at your life? Honestly,
it's heartwarming, actually. I didn't know when the murders happened that there was an interfaith council. So there is a Greater Kansas City Interfaith Council. And I learned about it several months later after the deaths. And I engaged with the Interfaith Council. And what Faith Always Wins does is we have become a new entity in Kansas City to bring faiths together. I didn't know that when I brought Adam Hamilton and Rabbi Art Nimitoff together in probably 2015, I didn't know that they didn't already get together. I didn't know that. I thought that people, these people in positions of somewhat of authority in a religion would be having these types of conversations, but they weren't. And so I feel like God asked me to be a convener. I mean, my message from God has been bring my people together. So I've tried to do that. And then with COVID and me being, like you said, I'm in Florida, but I operate on Central Time. And I'm part of church every weekend. I'm just online. COVID, and I don't mean this negative. I hate to make this sound crass because I know people have died and I know people are sick. But there are positives to COVID for people who want to join from somewhere and want to be part of something and physically can't be there. And so that has been helpful. But what I've seen from afar, also more than faith, but what I've seen from afar in the faith community is that they are, it's not about the structure of the location. It's not about the structure of the synagogue or the structure of the church, the building itself. It's not about the facility. It's about the humans in the facility and how they can reach outside of the facility. And I think people are seeing that more. I was interviewed after the Tree of Life shooting. So the Tree of Life shooting happened October 27th in 2018. And I was interviewed after that happened. And someone asked the question, where are they going to find God now? And I almost said, are you kidding me? I said, in a park, in someone's home. I mean, God for Hindus. So my friend Sunaina Dumala, her husband Srinivas was murdered in Olathe. And Hindus do go to the Hindu temple for prayer. They do go and it's a ritual and they go for prayer and they have rituals, but they also have temples in their home. And if I needed somewhere to go and pray, Sunaina would let me come to her home and pray at her temple. I know she would. And it's beautiful. And she'll send me pictures of it. And she's got the deities there and she prays to the gods. And it's just with you all the time. And so again, it's like a physical presence in her house. But when she came to visit me and she wanted to pray here, she could pray here. So what I've seen from Kansas City is it really is the heartland. The Kansas City metropolitan area can be, and we continue to be part of it as the Faith Always Wins Foundation and the 7 Days activities. We tend to continue to be gathering people together to understand that we can have respectful conversations with one another. We can learn about each other and help one another. I have seen that. I have seen that it is not the building that matters. It's not that we're walking into that building and we're having a relationship in that building. It's about having human relationships with one another, no matter where we are. The other subject, real quickly, I'm sorry, I just wanted to say this because
please.
I was in Kansas City over 25 years, and now I'm in Southern Florida. The other thing that Kansas City has going for them is their medical care. And maybe it's just that I haven't found all the right people in Florida, but I tell my medical caregivers, my holistic caregivers, my acupuncturist, my chiropractor in Kansas City, I am struggling to find the same type of healthcare in our area. And so people in Kansas City are really, really blessed to have KU Medical, Children's Mercy, Advent Health, Olathe Medical, Truman Medical Center. I mean, I know this isn't a medical thing, but that's just after moving, I have looked back at faith and medical. Those are things that keep us alive.
Yeah.
And Kansas City has it really good, really going on.
the last thing I want to ask you about, because you've already been really generous with your time, I don't want to take all day, but I could talk to you all day. The last thing I want to ask you about is the after part of faith and the responsibility of people in the faith community to care for people after tragedy or after a dark period. I talked to Pastor Phil in a previous episode, and I think you watched that episode, a lot about the role of faith when it comes to the physical needs of someone, whether it be providing food to someone, providing shelter, providing clothes, that kind of thing. I think whenever COVID is over, quote unquote, and we come back to some sort of trying to get on the upswing, whenever this election season is over, whenever I don't know if the social unrest we've seen is going to be over anytime soon, but we're trying to improve from that as well too. I just want to ask you about the role of the faith community in providing for the emotional needs of a person or group of people after the bad, after the dark. Where is the right way? Because I did another story recently about, I talked to a couple of moms who both their sons were murdered, and they talked about, we don't use the word closure in this community when they were talking about in terms of finding the person or the person who did it being brought to justice. So this is not a closure question. This is you got to keep putting your foot forward question, and maybe you need some help with that. Where do you see the faith community maybe at its best and its worst of responding to that?
So what I was thinking of initially when you started talking is, to whom much is given, much is expected. And
Okay.
I've always thought that and felt that from my parents, specifically my dad as a medical professional. To whom much is given, much is expected. He had a God-given talent to be able to be smart enough to diagnose people and help them. And he spent his life literally till the day he died doing that. The faith community, all faith communities, and maybe they're just not as loud about it, but in particular, I know that the Muslim community gives and gives and gives. They give as much as they can give as well. They have every single time I've been to any prayer on a Friday at the Islamic Center of Johnson County, they have a fundraiser going on for someone else. They are collecting food for other people. Again, the church that I am in and part of is Church of the Resurrection. And, it's almost like Church of the Resurrection is trying to single-handedly lift up downtown Kansas City and Johnson County areas where people are hurting and need food, and kids need backpacks, and kids need supplies, etc. And now the significant need and care for mental health is enormous. And as a faith community, if we're feeling okay, if we're feeling healthy ourselves individually, I should be giving of myself to someone else. Now, there are days when I'm not feeling great. There are days when I'm hurting. There are days when it's not my day to give, and I have to give back to myself. And I think we have to be okay with that too. We have to, I talk about on my podcast a lot, we have to give ourselves permission to be sad. We have to give ourselves permission to have a crappy day. Some days we have crappy days. And then give ourselves permission to say, you know what, I'm feeling better today. I'm going to go help someone else today. But I would say, Taylor, that you don't have to have faith to do that. That you don't have to have faith to do that. I know people that are agnostic and atheists, and they are just as giving as anyone else. But shame on you if you're in the faith community and you're not doing it. Because it's what Jesus preached, specifically Christianity. And it's what Allah preaches. I mean, it's God. God in Islam is God, and Christianity is God in Judaism. The three Abrahamic faiths look to the same God. And that God says, leave our world in a better place. So the Abrahamic faiths, which represent a lot of people, God asks us to take care of our fellow neighbor. God asks us to love our neighbor. But I don't dismiss people who have no faith whatsoever. One of my friends from a long time ago, he was the nicest, kindest, most giving person. And I said, are you sure you're not a Christian? And he said, no, I'm not. And I said, well, like, you do Christian things, because I just do them because I'm human, and that's what my parents taught me. I said, okay. And that was me learning that you don't have to be of a faith to be giving. But I would say again, if you are of a faith that says to you, give to others and help others, by golly, you should be doing it. You should be doing it on days when you feel well enough to do it. And that would lead me, I just want to mention the company that I am creating is Workplace Healing. And Workplace Healing is focused on employers helping employees restore themselves back into the workplace. And so whether they are physically going back into the workplace or they've had a life disruption and they're trying to get back onto a Zoom meeting, et cetera. But there's a lot of people hurting. Experiences like mine are significant, but people have difficult experiences, divorce, cancer, COVID, just the stress of life causes disruption and chaos in our lives. And we want our work life to be normal. But when our boss doesn't know that, when our boss does not know how to have a conversation with us, then there's a clash. And so Workplace Healing is we're going to teach employers how to restore and reintegrate their employees after a life disruption. And so, the two women, myself and Lisa Cooper, who are putting it together, we're both Christian. But are we doing it because we're Christian? I don't know. We're doing it because we feel like it needs to be done. We're doing it because we feel like it's a mission. That doesn't mean that everyone we hire is going to be of faith. We're just going to hire people that we know for sure have very good values. People that are not of a faith can have good values and can be good humans. I don't know that the shooter in our case called himself a Christian. I don't know that for sure. But if he were going to call himself anything, I'm frightened to say he would have called himself a Christian. How scary is that? And he thought it was okay to murder people. So that's not Christian. So I have a faith. I have a very strong faith. But I also know that people who don't have a faith can be as good or better than I can be on any given day. And that's what Kansas City in particular and your conversations with people, I think, can help people do and understand, is that we can all come together under the idea of leaving the world in a better place.
Pretty well said. Before I let you go, tell people about your podcast and where they can find it, and more about what they can expect for 7 days when it rolls around again next year.
Yes. So my podcast is at mindycorporon.com. I have my own website, just Mindy Corporon, Corporon. I always say all O's.com. And my podcast is on there, and it's about grief. If you need to have a good cry, you might want to listen to my podcast. I talk about, sometimes I distribute my own podcast, and I'm talking to myself about life experiences that I've had and then how I've healed. And then I interview people who, similar to me, have had significant life disruptions, what caused them grief, and then how did they heal. So my most recent podcast was Rabbi Jeffrey Myers of the Tree of Life Synagogue. And I just released that one. So I'm very proud of that interview in particular. And then 7 days this year. So we were so exhausted after 7 days, 2020. I mean, pivoting in 4 weeks' time and going virtual was exhausting. I needed like a whole 30 days off. So 7 days, 2021 is going to be a little bit different. It is in the month of April, but it's not 7 days in a row. It's going to be 7 days throughout the month of April, giving everyone kind of a relief from each activity. So we will still have love, discover, others, connect, you, go, and onward. We are planning all of them, but they're not going to be 7 days in a row, but they all will be in the month of April. And we are either going to start on April 12th or April 13th. We are still in negotiation with a host site. April 13th is the day of the shooting. Sure. It would be the 7th anniversary of the shooting. So I'm not sure if we're supposed to open on the 12th or open on the 13th, but we're waiting to figure out what that looks like. But, kindness is needed, and we provide opportunities for people to increase their kindness through knowledge, mindset, and behaviors. That's what we do at 7 days.
Mindy, I can't thank you enough for your time, for your honesty. I can tell talking to you that you are a person who's been told she's crazy more than once. And I appreciate someone who can continue to talk even in the midst of that. And I appreciate your message of positivity. I think all of us need it as much as possible right now. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Taylor. Thanks for what you're doing. It's really good. And when I see the recording, I'll be sure and share it.